Hey, welcome to All About the Geek. I'm Jason Isaac, and here is the first video in a series that I'm calling NewbTuber. Now, while I am hardly an expert at creating YouTube videos, the goal about All About the Geek is to take the things that we are passionate about and teach people and share those experiences with the world. I'm hardly an expert at YouTube, but I have a lot of experience in a lot of different hobbies, and what I have learned is that when you start a new hobby, it's all the same. Or at least there are shared experiences that you can learn when you pick up, say, miniature painting that apply when you are talking about starting a YouTube channel. I'm doing that a little bit in reverse. What I'm going to be doing is using my experience over the last 5-6 months as I learned about YouTube and creating a channel and building a following, which I've been more or less successful at because it's new and I'm kind of doing the grind. I started to realize that if I took what I learned from painting, from martial arts, from board gaming, from any of the other hobbies that I've tried over the years and applied those how to get started in them methodologies, I would be a lot more successful. And that is what the NewbTuber series is about. It's about taking my journey as a new YouTuber and sharing that as a window to any hobby that you want to get started. Before we get into the meat of this discussion today, I just want to remind you that I stream every Sunday night on Twitch at twitch.tv/allaboutthegeek. And if you want to keep up to date on any additional streams, I usually do 3 or 4 additional streams on random days throughout the month. I encourage you to follow me on social media, whether that's Facebook or Twitter. Links for Twitch, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, which I don't use as much, but I'm trying to get better at, are all in the video description down below. The content for this video can pretty much be summed up as try before you buy. When you're first starting at a new hobby, it is a good idea to get started. Try doing some of the aspects of that hobby before you invest any significant money into it. Using my YouTube experience, I spent a lot of time kind of reading and watching YouTube videos on making YouTube videos when I should have just hit record and tried it. Figured out what I liked, what I didn't like, what I needed. I already had a good camera for recording in 1080p, but I had no idea about lighting or audio and those sorts of things. And I didn't know enough to know when I was watching good content about a review on product or whatnot. So what I wound up with is I've got an okay lavalier mic. I've got a kind of rubbish wireless lav setup, and I put on my wish list for Amazon, which I got from some family, some okay lighting that doesn't get bright enough, has some ability to control issues, like they're really loose in the head, and I can show you those at another time potentially. And while they're okay for backlighting or hair lighting or some of those sorts of things, they're not amazing for key lights. I've since upgraded and I've got a great key light that sits on my camera right now, and I'm looking at other stuff. When you're talking about a hobby, that same sort of thing can happen. You can wind up looking at, oh, I really think Chaos Space Marines are the best. They look awesome. And then you get into it and you find out you don't like how they play, you don't like how they work, you don't like painting them, you don't like assembling them. These are all issues that you can run into. So what you should look at doing is finding a way to try these things out before you spend a lot of money and invest in them. So while things like Warhammer miniatures are relatively easy to proxy or to use without investing money, you can use tokens, you can use cardboard cutouts, whatever, and borrow someone's codex or find a list online and, knowing the basic rules, be able to play the game. There are some areas where you just don't have that option, and one of those is airbrushes. So using airbrushing as that hard to try before you buy example, let's talk a little bit about what you should look at those items that are too expensive to just throw money at, the necessarily buying the best, especially if you don't know whether or not you're going to be good at it. This question actually came up on Spiky Book Bits just today while I was scrolling through, and someone asked, if I don't have several $100s to spend on an airbrush, or if I spend several $100s on an airbrush and find out I hate it, what do I do? And that's really the tricky part about any hobby, is at some point there's going to be a financial investment. And what I would recommend that you do is, first off, find a reputable source. So find some sort of YouTuber or magazine or impartial party to provide you with quality information about a variety of different types of whatever you're looking at. Let's use airbrushes as the example. So find someone who is an authority on airbrushes and listen to their comments. Look for reviewers who offer great information about not only the high-end stuff, but also entry-level items, and that have a variety of price points and talk about the pros and cons a lot. I recommend, for instance, the Aztec Air Brushes as a great entry level. Having done airbrushing for years, they offer a great price to performance entry-level spot. My friend Matt, who runs my favorite local gaming store, has been using the Aztec, which I believe are basically based on the Badger airbrush for years. Like, honestly, for as long as he's been hobbying, so something like 20 plus years, he's been using that airbrush system. And the airbrush for a dual action siphon feed airbrush is like $120 the last time I looked. So that's a great way to look. But I'm not an expert, so listening to me solely on that point is a bad idea. What I've recommended is find multiple sources who can recommend the same product. On the tech space, I would recommend that you look at Paul's Hardware. So Paul from Paul's Hardware is one of my kind of, I don't want to say mentor, because aside from a brief meeting at LTX last year, I've never talked to the fellow. But he is an example of a good reviewer who gives unbiased information and solid recommendations to his user community. So check him out and then look for reviewers that give you that same warm fuzzy from him as far as quality of what they're reviewing. Any time you're looking at an expensive hobby, maybe it's camera gear, maybe it's getting into high-end video games or high-end computer builds, there's always going to be a risk on that investment. And what you need to do is, ideally, once you've found some good recommendations, look for the recommendations that provide upgrade paths. So you started with, let's say, airbrushing again. You've decided to go with the Badger airbrush because at, $80 to $120, depending on the kit you're looking at, that's a reasonable investment for the brush itself. The other piece of the equipment you need then is a compressor. So if you get a solid mid-level compressor, even a cheap compressor, you're looking at probably $150 to $200, depending on where you live, plus or minus shipping and handling, that sort of thing. If you get a reasonable compressor, something that can go up with you as you get better at airbrushing, it's an investment that even if you decide you hate it, you can probably sell that again for most of your investment. A solid compressor that hasn't been overly used or abused, you can probably resell for 60 to 80% of your original investment. So you're not going to be hit too hard financially if you decide to bail in the hobby. Same sort of thing with camera gear. As long as you're not abusing it, camera gear can be resold at a reasonable rate. But just make sure that those pieces that are upgradable have a reasonable resale value. So that means you can't buy the lowest entry level piece there. Now, that being said, in a lot of these cases, whether you're talking camera gear, PC hardware, airbrushing, chances are you can find someone that can let you borrow some of that gear. Maybe your local hobby store has an airbrush that you can try on a paint night when they start happening again, because obviously we're still COVID. A lot of camera gear can be rented from various places. So I know that there's at least 3 or 4 places in Canada where I am that I can request camera gear, and for $10 or $30 a day, I can rent lenses, I can rent camera bodies, and they're usually relatively inexpensive. You know, rent it for a week, shoot some videos, see if you like it, see if it's worth the $1,000 or $1,500 investment for that piece of kit. So look for ways to try it, maybe with a smaller investment rather than just dumping the money straight out. And lastly, the best option is talk to your friends. Your friends may have experiences with some of this stuff, and if you don't ask, you know, check your Facebook Hive Mind. Throw a comment out on your favorite YouTuber or Twitch channel comment section and see if people have it. There's lots of Reddit pages and Discord pages where people are willing to provide some advice, and maybe you'll even find someone local who's willing to let you try some of that stuff out. So when you're starting new in a hobby, whenever possible, try to find a source that lets you try the product that you're looking to buy before you invest money in it. Again, there's lots of mechanisms. Proxy for Warhammer miniatures is a useful thing with your friends. Not everyone loves that particular thought, but if you're like, hey, I want to try this army before I spend money, most people are good with that. At any rate, that's going to wrap it up for this video. If you enjoyed this and want to see the rest of the videos in this series, I highly recommend that you hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. If you liked this video, slam the thumbs up button. If you didn't like it, hit the thumbs down. But in either case, I encourage you to leave a comment, either things that you'd like to see me improve in my videos, because I'm definitely working on that right now. And also, what new hobby are you trying? Maybe as a result of the COVID lockdown, you've decided to pick up a new hobby. Why don't you share that in the comments, and maybe it's something I've tried and I can give you some feedback on. Until next time, as always, work your wonk, wash your hands, and keep it geeky.